Welcome to the Bookish Hour with your hosts, Sarah E. Burr and J.C. Kenney. And we are live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Bookish Hour. I am one of your co-hosts, Sarah Burr.
And I'm your other co-host, J.C. Kenney. And hey, Sarah, let's get bookish.
Let's get bookish. We are so excited this week. We are joined by the amazing Ellen Byron. Ellen, welcome to the Bookish Hour. We are so thrilled to have you with us. I know that our chat folks are thrilled that you're here with us. And for our viewers, please make sure if you have questions for Ellen, put them in the YouTube chat and we will get to them as we go through our segment. But for anyone who may not be familiar with who you are, Ellen, do you mind just kind of giving a little bit of an introduction?
Absolutely. I am a recovering sitcom writer, I like to say. I actually started as a playwright and then New York, which is where I'm from. After I graduated Tulane University, I moved back to New York and pursued briefly an acting career and then segued into writing. And I was a freelance magazine writer too, mostly celebrity stuff. And then I decided to transfer to more lucrative work. So I moved out to Los Angeles and became a sitcom writer for shows like Wings and Just Shoot Me, Fairly Odd Parents. And I've always loved mysteries. So during a forced hiatus, I'll say, a period of unemployment, I thought I'll try writing a mystery. And the first one I tried writing, I actually wanted to kill off a writer I'd worked with who backstabbed cited a writing partner for TV for most of us. And it didn't come out very good. So that was in 1999. And I didn't really thought, well, I can't write mysteries. I'll just have to keep reading them. And then during another slow period in 2010 or 11, my friend, a good dear friend of mine, Mindy Schneider, another TV writer, started a small little writers group. And I thought, well, I'm going to try writing mystery again. And I did. And that was called originally Reality Checked. And then it won a William F. Deak Malice Domestic Grant for Unpublished Writers, which introduced me to Malice Domestic. I'd never heard of these conventions. I actually did a Google search to find that. And then I'd never heard of VoucherCon or Left Coast. I'd never heard of Sisters in Crime or MWA. And so Malice introduced me to all that. And it took me about 9 months to find a book agent, which is, I've had agents or managers since I was like in my 20s. But, you know, when you're starting in a new medium, it's a new adventure. So I went through that, found a great agent, Doug Grad, and then he took out Reality Checked. By that point, we gave it a different name. We called it You Can Never Be Too Thin or Too Dead. and it didn't sell. But while it was on submission, I just entertained myself by writing another mystery, and I decided to tap into an arena which had fed my theater. My first published play was called Graceland. And it was about two Elvis Presley fans who meet outside Graceland the night before it's going to be open to the public, each determined to be the very first person to set foot inside. And one of them was a young Cajun girl, which was inspired by all the travels. When my parents would come to visit me in Tulane, we'd go, tootling around Cajun country. And I just fell in love with the culture and the people and the food and the music. And so I channeled that. Well, and then in the late 90s, my husband and I took a trip to New Orleans for Jazz Fest. We actually took a couple. And we stayed one night at Maidwood Plantation, which was a kind of a no-host plantation. The hosts lived in New Orleans. They left instructions for us, and there was a few people working there who gave us the meal and stuff. But it had that kind of eerie, and then there were none feel to it, because it was us and these strangers, and you're having wine and cheese with people you don't know, and you're making small talk. And you were supposed to ring a bell to summon the dinner help, which was completely an anathema to us, progressive Northerners. So, and finally, a guy from Texas was like, "I'll bring it here. I don't know why you bring it." You know, we stayed in like one of the like rooms inside the plantation, so that was like super cool. Is I woke up in the morning and I had a chocolate bar in my backpack and it was half eaten. You know, showing me that we weren't alone and that
Oh my
it wasn't
gosh.
just a mouse. So anyway, that kind of stayed with me, and so 10 years later, when I was thinking about writing another book, I decided to you know, to turn that into, you know, the premise of the Cajun Country Mysteries, and it was about a family that isn't, you know, has this you know, this house that's been in their family for, you know, for hundreds of years, and they open to it to public as a B&B. And so there you have it. And so I wrote that, and then I channeled. I'm half Italian and half Jewish, and I channeled my Italian background into the Catering Hall Mysteries, which I write as Maria DiRico, which is my late nonna's maiden name. My mom is actually Italian. She came over when she was little. Yes, exactly. Here, that was the first book of the series. And then
But wait,
I
there's
just.
more.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Great. That's a fun. I have two fun Christmas books for those of you who like holiday reading, and I love writing holiday, and I had so much fun writing those. And then also, yes, thank you. Also writing Mardi Gras, you know, Mardi Gras book, Mardi Gras Murder, and the Halloween book, you know, Murder in the Bayou Boneyard. I love these theme things. Anyway, my new series is the Vintage Cook Mysteries, and it's actually set in New Orleans, which I was really excited about. Everyone thinks Cajun country. They go, "Oh, I love a New Orleans series." I go, "No, that's Cajun country." They get to New Orleans. They actually get there in a couple of books, including a Cajun Christmas Killing. But and that series is inspired by my own hobby of collecting vintage cookbooks, and I have a sorry. I have about 100 of those that I can't stop.
A
It's
hundred of
ridiculous.
them. Oh my gosh.
But I never made a single recipe from one of them until I decided to include recipes from the book, to adapt them and include them at the end of Bayou Book Thief, and the next one out, Wined and Died in New Orleans. So I think that brings me up to speed. That was
The
a long intro.
I no, the oh my goodness. You're the as reading Bayou Book Thief, the description of one of the dishes that was like ham and broccoli with cream sauce and then maraschino cherries around it, and just the way that your main character is like, you know, no wonder why people were so skinny back in the 1970s. I just like I remember cookbooks like that when I was a kid that my mom would share with me. And a
Oh
lot of them
yeah,
had like mayonnaise, a lot of like things with
that
mayonnaise
was. I was
dolloped on
still
top
so
of
love.
them.
I actually do now. I've done about a half dozen TikToks, which I put up on my YouTube channel and on, you know, other side everywhere, and where I talk about some of the vintage cookbooks in my collection. And that's one of my favorites. I think it's from 1968. And it's called Cooking for Two, and that's literally the cover shot. It's two stalks of broccoli that are wrapped in slices of processed ham that have maraschino cherries decorating it, and the dessert is like canned mandarin slices in a cup with what's obviously, you know, dairy topping like Cool Whip on top. And it was just like, and I tell this, and I one of the stories, I mean, one of the videos, I tell the story of how my mom and I, this is like in sometime in the 70s, you know, we decided to buy one of those processed ham spreads or something. And we bought it, and it was just tasted horrible. And we looked up the ingredients, and one of the ingredients, it said, you know, blah, blah, preservative, whatever. Then it said also used as paint thinner. And so that's what we
Yikes.
were eating in the late 60s or in the 70s.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, oh my God.
So how did your character of Ricky come to life?
Well, you know, I thought it would be interesting to write a character who was a young widow. Um, and, but, you know, I didn't want it to be sad. So, of course, then I had to make it a dysfunctional relationship. And
That
she's
was a good one.
28. And, you know, and then I like started tapping in, you know, I live in Los Angeles, and I actually just did a deal with Kensington for a new series that will launch probably in 2024 called The Golden Motel Mysteries, where my protagonist is a burned out sitcom writer. Where's that from? And she impulsively buys a motel in like a southernmost gold rush town at the foot of a national park that isn't remotely Yosemite. And her property shares a border with the national park. So when the first body drops, half of it's on the park and half it's on her property. So it brings in. But anyway, so with this book, it was kind of putting my foot into that world that I was in. And so I made my, incorporating a little of Los Angeles. So I decided my protagonist, she was abandoned at birth at Charity Hospital, and which of course was destroyed in Hurricane Katrina. So all the record, everything was just like, and so, and she was adopted by her NICU nurse. And then when she was 7 or 8, her mother dated and married a grip who was in town shooting a movie, which again, my TV background and my, in my TV movie, industry background, you have these people who come in, they're on location. So, and then they moved back to Los Angeles where he was from. And then she impulsively married when she was 25, this actor she met who was very charismatic, who was inspired by so many of the actors I've known my whole life because I started in theater. So, up until I became writing, like pretty much like 90% of my friends were actors, and I did comedy improv for years. So, that was my world. But, I have this thing about influencers. It just makes me insane that that's a thing, because it's like it's such a like, what do you have no, you don't have a talent. You just like spew stuff and suddenly you have like $1 million. And in my neighborhood, sometimes we have houses that are rented out. Like we had a house, a couple of blocks down that's rented out by, influencers. And like, be doing a nighttime walk and suddenly some like 19-year-old be luging down the street past me while someone else was filming at the bottom. So, so I know that world. I know the acting world. So I decided to make him an actor who was very frustrated and whose career was dying. So he started doing stupid YouTube stunts, and suddenly he had, he was famous. And so, and so he ended up dying doing a stupid YouTube stunt. And at that point they were separated, but she was still, married to him. So technically she's a widow. And she comes back to New Orleans to try to, to restart her life. And she takes her hobby of collecting vintage cookbooks and to run the gift shop at a new culinary house museum that's opened in the Garden District. And that was inspired by Ella Brennan. And the thing is, in New Orleans, 3 of the most famous restaurateurs, iconic, were Ruth Reichel, who's Ruth's Chris Steakhouse. She started that. But what she did is she bought this it's called Chris Steakhouse because she bought an existing restaurant, and the deal was she had to keep the name. So she just put her name in front of it.
Oh, wow.
So that's why I always wonder why is it called Ruth's Chris Steakhouse?
I've always wondered that.
The other was Leah Chase, who was the only Black among them. And she was the only chef of the 3. And she founded Dookie Chase, and which was a pivotal site during the civil rights fight for rights. And then the third was Ella Brennan of Brennan's Restaurant. And then the family had a falling out, and that's when she started Commander's Palace. And she owned a house in the Garden District. And I read a story about her sister Adelaide, who was a total character, how she would walk by this house and always dreamed of owning it someday. And when she had the money, she bought it. And so all of that kind of came together in my head to form the basis of the Vintage Cookbook Mysteries. I give long-winded answers. I'm sorry.
No, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. This is about you. So these folks, and all of our friends, Claudia, Jill, the Farmhouse Reader, Karen, Regina, DHB, Chelsea, Mark. Hello, everybody. They're here to listen to you, Ellen. They get enough of Sarah and I every 2 weeks. So,
if that's Mark Baker, he's heard a lot of these stories before. So sorry, Mark. There may be a couple of people who are, who could probably tell these stories for me at this point.
Well, these are new ones for us, and so it's wonderful. And one of the things, regardless of the series that you're writing, I love your books because they are literally laugh out loud funny.
Oh, thank you.
And that is something that is a skill that just boggles my mind because I also think back to Just Shoot Me, Wings, love those shows, and I just how you I don't even know how to ask this question. How do you write humor? That is just something that just blows my mind that you can do that, and you do it so brilliantly.
Oh, thank you. It's 10,000 hours. That's the Malcolm Gladwell. Okay. Well, I think part of it is, it's funny because I used to think that you really can't teach people. You can't teach people to be like humor. Like if you've ever seen a play done, and I have my own, by people who don't have an innate comic instinct, you realize how innate that can be. But I used to think you can't teach people to be funny. But what I learned, then I sat down and started thinking, okay, well, what are some of the tools I've learned over the years that I utilize for humor? And so I actually turned that into a webinar that I do sometimes, like humor hacks. And sometimes, I took classes, and one of the first, the simplest things I ever learned in this first class, I took it, I used to teach at UCLA, and then when I taught a semester at the extension program, I got a free class. So I would take various classes. And in one of the sitcom classes I took, this was like the simplest thing ever. Put the funny word at the end of the sentence. Like if you have there are words that are just innately funny. And if you have one of those, you put it at the end of the sentence, not at the beginning. Or no, you don't bury it in the middle. So you end on a funny word. Things like playing with status, like, and I always give the example, like in the movie Arthur, the most classic example is that he's the butler, but he has more high status than the wealthy guy. And, so he's funny because he's got a low status position, but a high status attitude. I don't know if you already watched the show Silicon Valley. It was interesting because the protagonist there was like a rich guy who had a low status attitude. And that's never quite as funny. The funniest character in that show initially, and who was eventually written off for various reasons, was the guy who started the incubator, who was this blousy, overweight, arrogant guy who was a completely low status guy, but had this total high status attitude about himself. And it was hilarious. So, playing things like that, contrasting things, I'm always looking for humor. But you also have to look in the right areas. There are certain moments where the humor is intrusive. Like if, someone is stumbling across, and you have to go to the real, like, if one of us literally found a dead body, we wouldn't immediately start cracking jokes. In fact, I flashed on not long ago. One of my first jobs out of college, I worked in the city of Manhattan at a place called Theater Communications Group. And one day, and I remember it was around the holidays, I took the elevator down, and I happened the elevator opened. There was a policeman standing there, and there were a couple of, and then I noticed to my right there were a couple of policemen. And I looked in the elevator, and there was a man lying there, and he had obviously died. He must have had a heart attack in the elevator. And to this day, I have such a vivid image of that man in the elevator, and there's absolutely nothing funny about that. And yet you can get to a funeral and not of that man, but of someone else, and suddenly bizarre things happen. I mean, I always give the example of there's Black humor to be had. The classic Mary Tyler episode, which is just Chuckles the Clown episode, which is a lesson for anyone in comedy. Such a simple premise that Chuckles the Clown has died. Funny. Okay, that's not funny. He was dressed as a peanut in a parade, already funny, and an elephant tried to shell him. The humor is building. Now, Mary is appalled that people keep breaking up at this funny image. And she is just thinks it's horrifying. So you get to the funeral and they're giving the eulogy, and they give, they want to sign off with Chuckles the Clown's classic sign off, which was a little song, a little dance, a little seltzer down your pants. Mary starts laughing. And it's watching her, and Mary Tyler Moore was in person, I know people who work with her, was problematic, I'll say, because, she wasn't quite who people would think she was. But watching her play that moment is just like a lesson in comic timing, because she is trying so hard not to laugh and covering up, and then suddenly everything is reversed. So it's a big reversal. Everyone's looking at her like, what are you doing? And she's, and she does everything. So finally, she just bursts out laughing, and then it transitions to crying. And, for anyone who wants to analyze comedy, I totally recognize, looking at the beats of that episode, which you can find on YouTube, I believe. So, and I'll do a pass where I look for humor opportunities. And some of it, humor is a defense mechanism. And so, it's a way of dealing with the world when the world, and it's a survival mechanism. I once said to someone when I was very high octane in New York, because I was always under pressure with these deadlines for these magazines. And I had editors who were like, and I was, they wanted me to get dirt on these celebrities I was interviewing. And it was very hard. And, it made me, I was always like this. And I remember saying to once, God, if I didn't have a sense of humor, I'd be unbearable. And they did not disagree. So
I think the humor aspect of a cozy mystery is what makes it so endearing to readers. And what I'm curious about, Ellen, when you had the idea to write a mystery, was it automatically like something that you knew, like which genre, like specific in mystery that you were after, or were you like, I'm going to write a police procedural?
No, I actually didn't even know what a cozy was. I mean, I knew I loved Agatha Christie, and I knew I hated books where teenage girls were attacked and mutilated and murdered, and I just didn't want to read anything like that. I love historical mysteries. That's probably my favorite genre, which isn't at all what I write, and it's often aren't funny mysteries. And I wrote a standalone, which is like the unfunniest thing I've written, and it's so weird to me to read that because it feels like someone else wrote it. I think it's just my natural gravitation to it. And one thing that really frustrates me in our field, in mysteries is the lack of, and it's true in other places too. It's somehow humor doesn't have the same gravitas or respect that books that don't have humor do. You don't see them nominated for Edgar's or for Agatha or for Anthony's. They do. Left Coast Crime has the Best Humorous Award, which is very nice, acknowledges that. And, of course, Malice is for, traditional and by nature also cozy mysteries. And I'm thrilled that MWA is going to be doing the Lillian Braun Award to show respect and acknowledgement of the genre. But somehow people think that, that writing humor is like, there's something fluffy or light about it, when it's really so hard. I mean, I read a quote where Vivian Leigh said, it's much easier to make people cry than to make them laugh. And that was so true. And another example I'll give you is like Preston Sturges' brilliant movie, Sullivan's Travels. The end of that movie is just a testimonial to the power of humor and how it deserves more respect than it gets. And that's true of the Oscars too. I mean, Emmys have like the sitcom category, the comedy category, and then they have drama, because you can't loop them together because no comedy would ever be nominated. I mean, when was the last time a funny movie won an Oscar? Annie Hall? Was that? I'm trying to think if anything since then.
Working Girl, maybe?
Didn't win an Oscar, not for Best Picture.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
or even get nominated. So
Yeah.
I'm constantly fighting the battle to earn cozies, place at the table with suspense and thrillers, and also the sub battle of people realizing that humor is hard. I would go to a party and there'd be humor, for TV, like an industry party, and there'd be drama writers and comedy writers, and the drama writers would be upbeat and up to the sitcom writers would look like hell, because when you're doing a sitcom, when you're doing a multi-camera sitcom, I mean, you're there, like, you don't leave. It's just like you're doing so much at the same time, it's impossible, and you're trying to make it funny. And I have been in rooms at 6 o'clock in the morning where you're trying to punch up a script and be funny. So it is hard.
I just can't imagine, the challenges, because, I mean, it's, at least to me, it's, I've been writing for 10 years, got over a dozen books out, and I can think of maybe 2 or 3 lines, maybe in all of them, where I've been able to get somebody to laugh. And I think it's a real gift. And I take my hat off to those of you who do it and do it well. And, it's like Mark just said, I mean, he just commented that, he looks to entertainment to laugh and be happy. And, I think we need more of that in the world, to be honest.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I really, my Catering Hall Mysteries are, if you just want pure funny, that's a series to read. Because, with my other books, though, I do try, like the Catering Hall, the Cajun Country Mysteries, I call it sleuth commentary. Like, there are undercurrents of racism, there are undercurrents of, anti-Semitism, but done in a very light way, and sometimes a humorous way, like people saying things and other people, like, their mouth saying they can't believe that dropped out of someone's mouth. There's a teen pregnancy. So I deal with I deal with that. And in this, in the Vintage Cookbooks, my character was raised, her adoptive mother is Black, her adoptive father is Hispanic. And there's a moment she says, she grew up in Los Angeles where, no one thought to mention or comment on that, or if they did have any thoughts, they kept them to themselves, and so, I try to like get some of that in, and also there's more a pathos of trying to find, who your birth family is, and and then the pathos of being a new person, a new series. And in the Catering Hall Mysteries they're my like sitcom on, they're like, I call them my TV, my first agent told me I have a theater voice and a TV voice, and the Catering Hall Mysteries are really my TV voice, and the others are more of my my film voice. Well, I'd say my theater and film voice. I'm looking.
Well, I tell you what, Karen.
I'm looking at my camera, but I should be looking. My eyes.
Karen Lake is just said the Catering Hall Mysteries are, quote, so funny, unquote. So,
thank you.
Right there, yes. Yeah. And one of the things I've got to ask about those is, growing up, I'm a born and bred Midwesterner, and we don't have the mob, for lack of a better term, that we know of here in good old central Indiana. But the mob is, kind of front and center in the Catering Hall books. Can you talk about, a little bit of that? It's like,
well, I have something very interesting.
It seems really real.
Some people might know this, that my grandfather on the Jewish side was actually in the mob. He was low level gangster, and he went to jail for embezzlement. And he came out, and he disappeared in 1933. And when my grandmother went to look for him, his gangster friends told her she'd be lucky he wasn't at the bottom of the river, which is now at this, I mean, growing up, we thought, well, maybe he ran off and started another family. I mean, that's that happened a lot in the 30s. But I have a feeling that was not the case here. Then on my Italian side, I'm not going to say to, my immediate family, no. I will say that I learned from a cousin that one of the cousins by marriage, that two of his brothers were in the mob. And, there was always, were in the mob, and both went to jail for murder. And one was actually out here. He was which is so interesting to me. And, it was very, there were certain businesses in New York that it was very hard, like the linen business. I remember meeting, there was a kid in the community where I grew up, a young kid whose family, was in the mob, and he would brag about and show us a card about how he was the owner of a linen business. So he was 16. So there were certain, but the truth is too that the mob also had legitimate businesses. They did not just have criminal enterprises, and some of them were fronts, and some of them were, legitimate businesses. And it's so interesting because when I first came out here, I was doing a lot of, and when I lived in New York too, I taught a lot of playwriting workshops in the New York City and the Los Angeles school system, and I was often sent to really poor high schools and low income, not just high schools, but elementary schools. And one thing I saw, I'll so vividly at one high school in New York, it broke my heart that these kids, this teacher had given up. She'd been bullied and kowtowed into complete giving up. And these kids were so frustrated and so bored, and they wanted to learn. And they had been given up on by the system. And so a lot of them ended up going into gangs. And so some gangs are, some, not all. I mean, gangs are terrible and they're destructive and dangerous, and violent. There's, nothing good about them. But I did learn that some of these kids, it was like a family for them. It was the family they didn't have, and somewhere to channel the energy and sometimes abilities, that they weren't allowed to utilize in other aspects of their life. And so, I just kind of used a lot of that, used a lot of my own experience. And, there were other things that knowing this will be public, I can't say, but my family, my Uncle Henry, who had a great sense of humor, he once said that our family crest was a fierce Italian warrior and our family running away from him. So, my immediate family was not mobbed up. Oh, but one thing that was interesting is that in doing, a lot of the research, because my standalone was inspired by the disappearance of my grandfather, and it's set in the past to the present, and doing a lot of research and talking, my Jewish family, I would try to talk to his siblings who were still alive when I was younger. They would not talk about it. It was for the Jewish, and you don't hear as much about it now. For them, it was a stain on the family to have a son. It was nothing to be proud of or to brag about. It was to have that in your family was a terrible thing. And my great aunt, the only thing she would ever tell me was that they said about your grandfather, and I have to do the accent. They said about your grandfather, he would rather earn a dishonest dime than an honest dollar. So it was interesting because in 1990, I was always trying to find out, I grew up haunted by this, and my dad I never once heard him mention his father. And then his stepfather committed suicide when he was 21. So he had a terrible, terrible childhood. His mother it was arranged marriage, and they had a lot of money. It was all gone in depression. It was just like terrible. But I somehow, through my Aunt Molly, who was married into the family and is obsessed and fascinated as I would, she was married to one of my grandfather's brothers. She connected me with a cousin who was 90 in 1990, and he would tell me some stories about like my grandfather appearing at his shop with thuggish relatives, and he told me that my grandfather knocked up his father-in-law's nurse. I guess like apparently my great grandfather had a stroke or something, and I did some census research, and at one point in 1930, my father and his parents and his grandparents were living in the same building on West End Avenue. So I assume that's when my grandfather was close enough to impregnate this woman, poor woman.
Oh, wow.
Oh, we got off the topic of humor. And onto the sordid past of my family.
No, that's that's the beauty of this show. We chat and it's all great. I do want to take a moment though and just let you all know we are about halfway through the hour, and so it is time for the giveaway, to announce the giveaway. So yes. I'm going to throw it over to Sarah, who always does this much more eloquently than me.
Well, Ellen has graciously donated a copy of her latest book, Bayou Book Thief. She can showcase it. It's the most gorgeous cover. Oh my gosh. And Ellen, when I was like doing the graphics for our show today, I was like, oh my gosh, your book cover like matches our color scheme that we have here.
Yes,
absolutely perfect. I was like, wow, this looks really good on here.
Yeah, this is inspired, although the paneling is off by one of my favorite. This is actually not what the house in the book looks like. It's a different house, but excuse me, it is one of my favorite houses in the Garden District.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful cover, fabulous book. And Ellen will be giving away a copy this evening. Ellen, do you have a secret word or magic word that you would like everyone to use if they are interested in entering the giveaway?
Yes. Now, do I say the word?
Oh, yes, you do. Yep.
Okay. The word is peacocks.
Peacocks. And why, or do you mind sharing why the word is peacocks?
Because there are two peacocks, Gumbo and Jambalaya, in the series. And I don't, one time with my husband and my daughter, I went to Tulane, my daughter just graduated from Loyola in New Orleans. And one time we were visiting her, we were staying at a place in what's known as the Carrollton area. And I looked out and there was a peacock just walking down the street. And I thought, oh, it'd be so perfect if there were peacocks in this Garden District mansions that are part of it. So I wrote in these peacocks with attitude, because as we all know, peacocks do have attitude.
They do. They bring such color to some really fun scenes. So those of you guys know the drill. If you're new to the Bookish Hour this week, go ahead, make sure that you're logged into YouTube, and in the chat, put the word peacocks, and we'll be doing the drawing at the end of the hour for our winner. So while folks are doing that, Ellen, you've written quite a few murder mysteries. What is your favorite way to kill somebody?
I don't know if I have a favorite way. I actually wish I could come up with some. I feel like I need to come up with some more creative ways than I have. But what's fun? Oh, wait, no. What's fun in this series is that I'm trying. I had a 2-book deal. I'm hoping they'll extend it. I should know soon. So go out and buy the books and bring the sales rate so that they want to pick it up. But I'm trying to use vintage kitchenware for murder. So there is a can opener, a circa 1930s can opener that is the murder weapon in this book, and that was really fun. And it was inspired when I was a kid. My mom and I were watching this very short-lived game show where they would show us things to different. They'd have a mother or a grandmother and a girl, and they'd show them something and see if they could figure out how it was used. And I forgot how they scored or something, but my mom and I just remember we were roaring with laughter. My mom and I still laugh about it, and she'll still bring it up because they showed one of those vintagey, like 1930s can openers, and the girl was just like, she could not figure it out. So that stayed with me, and it has become a murder weapon. And then wined and died another culinary utensil as a murder weapon.
I think that's a very
Well, I tell you
clever
what, those
way to go about
classic
it.
can openers, those things are dangerous. I remember
I
those,
know.
using those growing up. It's like that's a sharp edge.
I know. And and it's funny because there is a scene in Wined and Died. I had really a lot of fun creating Nina the detective and the relationship between her and my protagonist Ricky. And it's really funny because several people have said to me, I thought that was going to be the romantic interest because they have this kind of like, back and forth, and Nina was inspired by this detective, this woman who detective in one of the Citizens Police Academy I did in Los Angeles. She was tough as nails, and I just kind of channeled her into Nina. But, Ricky is like, thinking, well, I'm going to have to stick to soft items or items that people can't use to kill each other. And she lists them. And the detective just lists, oh, that can be used to strangle someone. You can suffocate someone with that. She just goes through all the items that Ricky mentions and says how they could be turned into murder weapons. So that was fun.
This has just been delightful, and I want to also encourage folks, if anybody has a question for Ellen, type it on into the chat. We'll ask her, because this isn't just about us asking questions. I mean, believe me, Sarah and I, we could ask Ellen, we could ask you questions all night long, but if anybody else wants to, feel free to join in. And yes,
I do want to point out that you're wearing Mardi Gras beads. So
yes, I am. Yeah, I will. Since you brought it up, in honor of, as for those of you who don't know or may have kind of missed out on it, Ellen has a pretty much a lifelong love affair with the wonderful city of New Orleans. And so I thought it was only appropriate with having her as a guest that I've got my gold shirt, I've got my Mardi Gras purple and green beads here, and I've got my T-shirt that says the Preservation Hall Jazz Band. So we're celebrating a little bit of New Orleans here. So
I have it. That yes. Actually segues perfectly into my question about the setting that you've created, Ellen, or the setting that you've built upon. Because as I was reading, I was really curious because I've been to New Orleans a couple of times. I don't know about it nearly enough as much as I'd like to. And I was curious as to how much of the scene and the setting that you've painted for the reader, how much of it is like a map of New Orleans versus stuff that you've created yourself?
It is pretty much all I made up street names for certain, for convenience sake, but the locations I'm writing about are real.
Okay.
Some of them aren't specific, like the place where the first victim lived is a type of place I've seen, and so so it's not one specific place. Where my protagonist lives in the series was actually an Airbnb we stayed at before I decided I preferred hotels. We went back to hotels, hotels. The Bayou Book, the Bayou Backyard is actually inspired by one of my favorite places, the Chop Yard, which is an indoor-outdoor bar in New Orleans that I just was a couple of blocks from where we were staying. So that's all very real. I just gave it a different name.
Gotcha.
And the place, the mansion Bon V Culinary House Museum is a real house in the Garden District. I went during one of my visits to New Orleans, one of my trips there. I spent several hours wandering the Garden District, and I landed on that one for it. And I play with it in a little bit, but but I use different, I make up names for the streets, because you have to have some fiction, otherwise, it's tricky. But the thing is, in the Catering Hall Mysteries, that's my life. Where my character lives is where my nonna lived. Where she works is one of the catering halls cousins ran, where my husband and I had our New York reception when we got married. When it's such a blast from the past, because when my character is walking from the subway to home, it's the route I would take when I would walk from the subway to visit my nonna or Tsitsi Rose and Uncle Henry who lived upstairs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That is so cool. That's fabulous.
Now,
and
there's a funny story with the Cajun Country Mysteries. That's a completely fictional location. I call it a Cajun Brigadoon, but it was inspired by a real place I visited in the mid '80s. And the thing is that I took my family back there in 2015. I hadn't been back in like 30 years, and I was so excited. And it was like nothing like it. It didn't seem at all like the place I created. It was a little more. I was like, oh, I'm not sure the place I created really exists.
Well, I tell you, and speaking of the Cajun Country Mysteries, I have to say one of the things that I really enjoy with all your books is are the names, but especially those down in Cajun country. And since we have an audience, this is my chance to say it. For my money, the best name of any character in any sort of medium ever is Gaynell Bourgeois. And tell us a little bit about Gaynell, because
oh my gosh, that's my friend Gaynell. Yeah. That's hilarious. Gaynell is I met Gaynell in the late 1980s. My friend Jan and I drove up the River Road, and we stopped at this. I love abandoned places. I'm obsessed with them. And we found this like derelict plantation, but they were doing tours of it. But like this little tiny trailer, and it was called Ashland Belle Helene. And what it turned out is that the family was fighting. There's something called forced heirship because of the Napoleonic Code in New Orleans, where the heirs, if there's not a will or something, everyone has to inherit. And there was Bill Hayward was one of the descendants, and he was holding out. He did not want to sell to Shell Oil, who wanted to buy the property. And so instead he was hosting tours, and the place there was no floor. There was just a big hole. They had shot Clint Eastwood had shot The Beguiled there. So I met Gaynell, and she was absolutely delightful, and we hit it off. And she's 83. She's older than me. But we just connected, and then we kind of lost touch. And I write about this in the back of the first or second book, that in the late 90s, 10 years later or so, when my husband and I were doing our trip, we stopped at Homa's house into the gift shop. And I said to the person there, and I said, I had a friend who worked at Ashland Belle Helene, whose name is Gaynell Bourgeois. Gaynell Bourgeois Moore, do you know her? She goes, no, she works here. And she got on the big old walkie-talkie, and then Gaynell comes running down the stairs, holding up her, fake and plantation outfit. And we reconnected, and she became friends with my parents. In fact, we just spent the night with her when I was in Louisiana for the Louisiana Book Festival. She is one of my favorite people, and I tell the story that I gave her the choice. I said, I'm going to name a character after you, and you have a choice. You can be the Grand Mayor, or you can be the 19-year-old musician. And Gaynell was like, oh, I'll be the 19-year-old. So, because Gaynell is this amazing woman. She's a self-taught artist, a self-taught musician. She wrote a memoir. I mean, she's just like, she's just like this, and she's 100% Cajun. Like, she's just this. I just adore her. She's just one of my favorite people in the world. So, and it's a great name.
Yes.
And we have in our chat, we have Renee saying that she wants to thank you for the Louisiana setting. She has family ties there, where that she lives an hour and a half away from it and has lots of fun memories. And that for Christmas they're having gumbo. So.
Oh, that's fantastic. My daughter, last year, my daughter was like, what do I get Mom for Christmas? And my husband very wisely said, well, you don't have to make her something. And my daughter is a wonderful cook, much better than I am. The fact there are recipes in my books is insane. It's the hardest part. But she made gumbo, and it was fabulous.
Nice.
So I have not made gumbo, and I cheated. And when I needed a gumbo recipe for my book, I said, Gaynell, why don't you tell me how you make gumbo? And of course, it's getting like trying to get the tomato, the gravy that that Zizi Rose or Nonna made, out of somebody. Zizi Rose would be like, well, you put all of this, and it would, no one. It wasn't like measure a teaspoon of this. So I got to put it in exactly Gaynell's words.
That's priceless. That really is. Well, and unfortunately, our hour is almost up. So
How did that
want to remind
happen?
everybody.
That was
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
like
It well,
time
we're
flies.
letting the good times roll here.
Yeah. Well, I'm a chatterbox, so
This is great. This
it's
has been
harder to
so
get me
much
to
fun.
shut up than to get me talking.
I love hearing
No,
about
no.
New Orleans because my favorite types of scary movies are always ones that take place in New Orleans. And when I was down there, I did like a ghost tour through the city,
Oh,
and we went at like 5 o'clock, so it was still light out. But the entire time, I was like, this is the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my life. Because I remember there was an apothecary that we went by where they're like,
oh
yes,
yeah, yeah. That's a
where they
yeah.
like
It's a
you could
museum
come in
now.
and get like your medicines, or if you went upstairs and like somebody operated on you and you died, your body was like dropped through a chute that like just fell a couple stories into like a horse's cart, and it was just like what. There like it has so
It's
many
such a
amazing stories.
It really is. It's just like such a fascinating place, a culture unto itself. I mean, and that's one thing that I love about even Cajun country. I mean, it's an area of the country that has its own language, its own music, its
Mm.
own food. It's really kind of just unique unto itself.
Have
And New Orleanians are just so resilient and amusing and great senses of humor.
I
I love
um
it.
I am curious, Ellen, if you've ever seen a copy of, I think it's like the Cajun Night Before Christmas. My dad
Yes.
used to read it to me, and he would do
Really?
it with a Cajun accent, and it was just like I remember it being so fun because it's like Santa, instead of his reindeer, he's got his alligators coming in.
I've got a tiny copy of it that I hang as a Christmas ornament on a Christmas tree.
Oh wow. Oh, I might have to look for an ornament like that. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. So
Well,
Jim,
I
we
tell you
gotta,
what.
yeah, we've blown through our hour. Time
Yeah.
flies.
And so, just a reminder for folks, if you haven't done so yet, Ellen is giving away a copy of what are you giving away, Ellen? To a
I'm giving
lucky
you a copy of this. And I don't know, you were going to ask what I'm up to or reading or something.
Oh yes.
Well, yeah, we're going to get to that
Oh,
just
okay.
here in a second. Yeah. But yeah, so, and Ellen, what is the secret word again?
Peacocks.
Yes.
So make
Yes,
sure,
peacock. So if you,
yes,
there we go, one right there.
get your
So,
magic words
if you,
in.
Wait, do I have oh, shoot, I don't have a copy of it. Look up, go to wherever you can find Penguin or something, a copy of Wined and Died, because the cover artist did a brilliant thing with that cover. She incorporated the peacock into the stained glass above the door.
Ooh.
oh,
Yeah,
that's
it's a
cool.
gorgeous
That's
cover.
cool. And I do want to mention DHB just
Santa
popped in
Gator.
to let you all know that Santa Gator is the best, according to DHB. So there we go.
That's funny.
Yeah, well, so, and again, I feel like I'm being the mean principal here, making sure we're on time. So we have gotten to the last few minutes of the show where we kind of talk about shout outs to what we're watching, what we're listening to, what we're reading. So, Sarah, how about you? What recommendations do you have for us?
So I am going to be very much in left field for this week. I have been reading a manga series that is called A Sign of Affection. It's the cutest thing that I came across it on Kindle Unlimited. And it's about a young woman who was born deaf, and the romantic interest in her life is beginning to learn sign language, and it's their story told through, with manga, it's mostly told through pictures, and I've never read a book before that was presenting sign language both in visual and written form, and it's really sweet. I like blew through the whole series over the weekend, and now I'm just waiting for the next one. So it's called A Sign of Affection, and it's free to read on Kindle Unlimited. As
Oh,
for what
nice.
I am watching, I recently discovered the Investigation Discovery Network, which has like a host of all these true crime shows available to watch. And I've been watching one called Southern Gothic, which kind of lends to Ellen what we've been talking about with the South area, and so it's all murder mysteries that take place in the South, and they're well, not luckily, I guess, not great that they all happen, but they've all been solved. So you have that nice like resolution that I often find when I watch open cases that I'm just like, I need to know who did it. But these ones, it's reenacted and presented, and so it's kind of like a 48 hours feel to it, but very focused on southern towns and everything. So it's very good.
Great. Me?
Ellen, how about you?
I cannot remember the last thing I watched. We finished watching something, and I can't remember what it was. So of course now we're watching The Crown. But I will give a shout out. Oh, Magpie Murders. That's what it was. It was very fun to watch that. But I also give a shout out if I don't know if HBO Max is showing Righteous Gemstones right now, but I have a friend who plays. It's about a evangelical family, one of those like giant church families, and it's dark and lewd and hilarious. And a friend of mine is the daughter, Judy Gemstone and Edie Patterson. And if you want a lesson in comedy, watch Edie in action. She's great. And also I'm going to recommend a historical series that we watched last year called Atlantic Crossing, which is available through Passport, the PBS channel. And it's fascinating about the Crown Princess of Norway and how she affected the World War II through her relationship with Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And here's what I'm reading. I'm having lots of fun reading Greg Herron's new book, A Streetcar Named Murder. Speaking of New Orleans, I figure I want to bring that up because he lives there, and he writes it as T.G. Herron, and it's really got the flavor of a local. He's there and in the trenches, and it's a really fun read.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Very cool.
What about you, Jim?
This has been a great week for viewing for me because for what I'm watching, I have two recommendations. First, got to see Glass Onion, a Knives Out mystery in the theater. And
I went to a screening and heard him speak, and that's the second time. Lucky me. WGA.
Wow, that's so cool. It was just it's I don't want to say it's better than the first Knives Out mystery, but it is delightful. And Daniel Craig as Benoit Blanc is just so great.
It's got more humor than the first one. There's more
Yeah, and it's just fabulous. It's only in the theaters, I think, through the end of this weekend, but then it'll be back on Netflix right before Christmas. So, make sure you do that. And also, the other thing I watched, I feel like it was one of the cool kids because I got on it early on Netflix is Wednesday. The series featuring Wednesday Addams, who goes off to high school or kind of a school specifically for outcasts like her. And it's got really dark, dry humor, which is very much in the Addams Family classic genre. Wednesday is a mystery writer. As she's trying to figure out, there's been a series of murders. She's trying to figure out who the murderer is. During this, she's writing a book. And it's a murder mystery, and she even name drops Agatha Christie in the story. So it's like
checks all the boxes.
So yes, yeah. It's 8 episodes, and it was just a blast. And then just real quick, as far as what I'm reading is, right here comes the body. And I thought it was so funny, Ellen, when you were mentioning the point when Mia takes the walk from the subway to her grandma's house. I just read that a couple of nights ago. So
that's funny.
Yeah, so that was fun. Yeah. So
excellent.
So that's what I've been watching and reading.
So hopefully we've given our audience some suggestions to check out for the upcoming holiday season. Although I guess none of ours are really holiday themed. Very cheery. But all right, so we need to do our giveaway.
We do.
Our giveaway announcement. So last chance to put in the word peacocks into the chat before everything is tallied and our winner is announced. our
As I do
winner.
my drum roll here
Yes.
on the table.
Of a copy of A Bayou Book Thief by the wonderful Ellen Byron is the user Farmhouse Reader. Congratulations.
All right. Woohoo!
What we will do is go ahead and just email me your address, your mailing address, to our giveaways at thebookishhour.com. I will forward it on to Ellen. And if you could do that as soon as possible, because Ellen is going to the post office tomorrow, and we would like to make sure your book is there.
Yes, and I would like to get the post office as last time before the holidays, I'm hoping.
Oh, wow. Well, I hope that's really good that that'll be the last time, because we're just like the start of December. But
Yeah.
well, we'll be in touch for that. Again, Ellen, thank you for donating such a generous giveaway, and for donating your time with us this evening. It was wonderful to talk with you and to hear your amazing stories. And
Thank you so much for having me. It was truly an honor.
Well, we would love you to come back anytime, especially when you have your new series that you were talking about, the Golden Motel.
Golden Motel series.
That sounds like it.
Yeah, well, I think it's going to be pretty funny.
Could definitely have so many shenanigans going on. I bet. So again, thank you for sharing your time with us. If our readers want to connect with you, follow you, where is the best place for them to find you?
The best, find me, I have a newsletter, ellenbyron.com, and I'll be sending my December newsletter out this weekend. And I do, I try to share recipes, not this newsletter, or contests, but, and just make it fun. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram as Ellen Byron, Maria DiRico, and on Facebook as Ellen Byron Author, or Ellen Byron. So.
Perfect. Yes, and I can attest that Ellen's newsletter is like very fun, and it's like very engaging, and it's a good thing to have in your inbox. So definitely sign up if you can. So great. Yes, make sure ellenbyron.com to stay connected with Ellen, and again, welcome back anytime to talk about any of your wonderful books. Thank you for being here. And we will see our viewers. Thank you for joining us this evening live. We will be back on December 15th, I believe, for our last episode of 2022 before we come back in 2023. So have no fear. We will be back. We'll be joined by Michelle Cox on our December 15th episode. And until then, happy reading, everybody. Stay warm.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Happy holidays, yes. Thank you again for being here.
Take care.